Hey, Mike, I want to start with some NFL news. Dalvin Cook earlier this week announced that he's going to hold out. And obviously, last year, there were two high-profile running backs that held out with very different results, right? Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott. So the Dalvin Cook news, how or does that impact Alvin Kamara at all?
Well, I think everybody's waiting on what I think is the biggest piece of the puzzle, Derrick Henry.
Okay.
John Robinson has made it known that they are trying to work on a long-term deal for Derrick Henry. A couple weeks ago, I wrote this in an article that I talked to an AFC general manager, and he told me, listen, I would never really tell you this for any other position, but I don't think anybody's going to top Christian McCaffrey's deal. He said it doesn't matter if it's Henry or Cook or Kamara. I don't think any of those players are going to top McCaffrey. He said normally when a guy gets to that Mount Everest money level, he lasts there 2 weeks and somebody else goes a little bit higher than him. He said, I'm not real sure you can say that when you look at the McCaffrey deal and the fact that just the devaluation of the running back position itself throughout the years. And you just look at it in the draft, how many running backs went in round one?
None.
No.
Clyde.
So,
I'm going to hear that from the Catholic High people.
Oh, man, that was a swing and a miss on the bench.
Mike, I'm fixing to be in trouble, man.
Not fixing, you are in trouble. So I get it, and he brought up a number to me. He said, I think it'll fall, and he said, I said, I'm just guessing here. He said, I think it'll fall in the Le'Veon Bell type numbers, which is like 13.5 million. He said, that's where I think you'll see that part with Kamara and also with Dalvin Cook, in that range.
Okay.
Now, when I asked him about Henry, he was like, I'm not real sure. He said it may eclipse that. So he said, who becomes the first of the guys to sign? But, his feeling was, and I agree with it, that the Titans are looking to try to get Derek on a long-term deal. And I think that, Matt, is going to be a bigger precedent than what Dalvin Cook gets. Because now you're chasing, so to speak, the Derrick Henry number at this stage. And if you look at it over the last couple of years, you see the production, certainly with McCaffrey, his ability to not only run the football but catch it coming out of the backfield. Henry is a man out there on that football field as a runner. They haven't used him a lot as a receiver. Now, he can catch the ball pretty well, but their offense wasn't built around it like you see Minnesota trying to get Cook more involved in the passing game. What Sean Payton has done with Alvin Kamara and getting him the football out in the flat. And legitimately, you can make the argument, other than Michael Thomas, who's the most dependable guy?
It's Kamara.
It's Kamara. So, this thing about, he's going to take a discount deal, $10 million. Man, I ain't taking no $10 million. It ain't coming to that point.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of people tell me, $10, $11 million, look what he's making now. Yeah, I get it, but it's not the market value at this point when you look at the numbers of Ezekiel Elliott and you look at McCaffrey. Now, they may not top that, but it's going to be right under that. And I do think what the GM told me, I think is correct. Somewhere in that $13 to $13.5 million is where it's going to fall for both Cook and also Alvin. When you look at it average-wise, and not of the last year either, because that's where you can kind of fudge a little bit of numbers-wise. Because most likely if you got a 5-year contract or a 4-year contract with an option, they never see that money. You're not going to see it. Something's going to happen that they're going to get rid of that type player making that type money at that position today. It's just not the spot where you're seeing a lot of money being thrown around and where you can get backs in the second and third rounds of the draft. So, Matt, just to answer your question, I think more so the Derrick Henry contract, which I think may happen because there's a July 15th deadline date to that may affect Kamara more so than the Dalvin Cook contract.
Okay. Let me play devil's advocate, Mike. What if the Saints decided, okay, we don't think you're worth $13 million a year. We'll let you play out the final year of your deal. We'll franchise you twice and never pay him $13 million, and you have Kamara for 6 years. And then after that, what happens, happens.
Matt, it is the option, and certainly we've heard, Kirk Cousins talk about play that franchise tag. I'm not sure how well that goes over with Kamara.
Sure.
On that part. And this has just been my feeling. And having watched a lot of the contracts Mickey has done in the past, the contracts that they've had issues with, there's been some public comment about it. Even a few years back with Drew, that there was a lot kind of ping-ponged both ways with Breeze and the Saints. Have you heard one thing about that contract come out of anyone's mouth with the Saints or Alvin?
No.
That tells me that they're closer to a deal than what we might know.
Okay.
The Saints work, I think they do a really good job, and Mickey does a great job with this, along with Kai Harley, to work out a deal kind of behind the scenes where there's not a lot of talk and not a lot of banter, where you can get into, well, I deserve this, and I'm going to offer you that. But we saw a little bit of that, certainly with Breeze. We saw it in some of the contract deals that he's done. But Michael Thomas last year, it came like a lightning bolt. It
Sure.
was kind of out of left field. He got that contract. You didn't hear a lot about it before, and then all of a sudden it happens. And I've always felt that when you don't hear anything from them and there is not a lot of talk, that means progress is getting made. And I think that I've always felt that they would do a long-term deal with Kamara before training camp starts.
Okay.
I just think Sean feels he's that valuable to the offense as a runner and a receiver, and he causes a nightmare one-on-one downfield as a receiver. And is he going to carry the football like McCaffrey and Henry? No. But he'll catch a lot more passes than Derek will, and he won't do it like what McCaffrey does. But that's kind of the high moment mark with it. And the thing with Cook is his injuries. That's the thing that I would have a little bit of take back with it. Dalvin's been nicked up quite a bit. And so I'd have some concerns. We saw last year with Alvin, try to play through the injuries that he had last year.
Yep.
Dalvin's had some missed time. You go back and just do a little bit of research and see where he's missed time and considerable time in the National Football League. So I do think Derrick Henry's contract is the one you probably are waiting on, because I think you can measure it up to that.
Earlier this week, we were talking about Eli Holstein getting an offer for the 2023 class. You and I have talked about Arch Manning, of course, in that class as well. And then Walker Howard, Jamie's son, is prepared to make his announcement tomorrow for the class of 2022. Like, all of a sudden we blinked and Louisiana's producing great quarterback talent in high school. Do you have any explanation as to why this is all of a sudden this renaissance has happened?
Same thing as receivers. 7-on-7's changed the world. You can practice it 8-9 months out of the year. You have a younger group of coaches now that teach it and coach it. I told this to Peyton Manning a year ago he had the idea of the Manning camp. A lot of people think it's Archie, but it's not. It's Peyton. Peyton was the one who came up with it because, he would look at the Picayune on a Saturday morning, and some teams getting beat 56-13, and they threw 6 passes. And he was like, something's got to be done. We got to be able to work this. And so I think certainly long before 7-on-7, Peyton Manning came up with the idea, and Archie sort of ran with it, to do these camps, and now it's all over. And the 7-on-7 now has taken over. You're getting quarterbacks today that are much more advanced in their development of throwing the football. Matt, the crazy thing is, okay, I grew up in a little bit different era than you, but I can remember, in the 70s, watching quarterback. Terry Bradshaw was a Louisiana high school quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
James Shaq Harris, playing in the NFL from Grambling, he was an NFL quarterback. Joe Ferguson, even though he went to Arkansas, was a Louisiana guy. Burt Jones, Doug Williams, Bobby J,
mm-hmm.
John Forcade, Norris Weiss, David Woodley. All those guys played in the NFL. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see it again, where I do think we went through a stage where the pickings was sort of slim, unless, your last name was Manning. And so we went through that sort of deal in Louisiana, and a lot of it was, I think coaches sort of had a system of running the football. Now today it's different. Everybody's sort of running their version of the spread, and I think you're getting a better grade of advancement of a quarterback that has thrown the football because of the advent on 7-on-7. I think
Mike,
it is.
Let me interrupt. Go back to the 70s, though. Before you go, why was it different in the 70s, and then what happened to transition out of that era?
Well, because I think back then, if you look at the teams that were successful in the NFL in the 50s, a lot of it had to do with, you looked out west, and Bob Waterfield and Norm Van Brocklin. Now, man, I'm throwing it out, man.
That's okay.
I can remember, I can remember my dad talking about, Bob Waterfield and Van Brocklin out with the Rams throwing the football, and Otto Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Because for my dad of a certain era, man, there ain't nobody better than Otto Graham. Nobody was better than Automatic Otto. And listen, he had a point for his time. And listen, Otto was at a different world. And there was a lot of throwing the football back then in the 50s and 60s. So what happened late in the 60s? Darrell Royal and Emery Ballard with the wishbone. It changed it. You had success running the football
mm-hmm.
with at Alabama, at Oklahoma, at University of Texas, USC, Student Body Right, all those great backs that came out of that particular era from that. And I think it sort of killed the passing game a little bit, where it was much more run-oriented. And now all of a sudden I do think 7-on-7, which developed out west in the California Pacific region and in the Texas region, has sort of changed the world again. But, if you look at the ages, of those guys that, I just kind of off the top of my head,
mm-hmm.
they're all sort of in a 8 to 10 year range,
mm-hmm.
where a lot of coaches, first maybe got that idea. Man, you're watching it on TV and you might see what the Rams are doing or what the Browns are doing, and Johnny Unitas, and the Colts throwing the ball, and Y.A. Tittle throwing the football with the Giants, and look at the position Frank Gifford started. Okay? People of a certain age, I remember Frank Gifford. He was on Monday Night Football.
That's my point of reference, Mike.
Okay, and so, I didn't watch Frank Gifford play, with the Giants, but, man, I heard all about him, he was sort of this hybrid running back wide receiver. What do we have today? A lot of it exactly the same sort of thing, because, I have an uncle of mine who used to always say this, man, Paul Hornung in today's world, a healthy one,
mm-hmm.
how good of a player Paul Hornung would be. Because he'd really be a perfect fit for today's NFL. He was a former quarterback that could catch the ball. He could kick the ball. He was a really good running back, and him and Jimmy certainly were a great team out with the Packers. But, man, I think a little bit is what's happening in the professional ranks. A lot of people were trying to duplicate. And then I think the wishbone, running the football, sort of changed that point. for a while, and they had success with it. Look at the SEC, great example. If it's Coach McClendon after Paul Dietzel, Bert Jones was a part-time starter until his senior year.
Mm-hmm.
Bert Jones.
Yeah.
Talking about, nothing against Lions, but again, you understand that we're talking about Bert Jones here. That, you had it in your head a certain way that was going to win. Didn't it carry into the 80s? And who changed it? Steve Spurrier.
Okay.
In the SEC. Didn't he change it?
Sure.
Fun and gun. Man, spread them out. Throw the football all over the place. He changed this conference as much as Bryant did. He changed it in that style like Bryant did when he went to the wishbone in the late 60s. Because, they had a great run at Alabama, and then the team sort of caught up to him. So what did he do? He duplicated what was winning at Texas. He goes watch Darrell Royal practice, and he put in the wishbone. And they had that run in the 70s, that unprecedented, and what they were able to do. And so I do think that there's carryover. What success is happening at the professional and the college level, coaches at the high school are going to repeat it. Why wouldn't you? That's what you see. That's where you're from. And how things change in the SEC once Spurrier hit down. The success of Florida.
Yeah.
And you know what? And he rubbed your nose in it. Almost like, if you got a dog that kind of wee-wees on the ground, in your house, you teach him a little lesson, and so to speak. He didn't just beat you. He sort of rubbed your nose in it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so for you to compete against Spurrier, you better throw it. You better be able to, because you were going to have a difficult time. And I don't think Urban Meyer gets enough credit for what he did, not just in a short time, but kind of college football-wise, and what he put in that spread offense. When he put it in at Utah, and then the great success he had at Florida, and what he had at Ohio State. Hasn't everybody sort of duplicated what Urban Meyer did?
Yeah.
They're duplicating that. So guess what? A high school coach, I'm watching it. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to do what they're doing. And so that's why I think you're starting to see it. But I do think while Meyer and Spurrier kind of started this now, I think it was too, in part, for a lot of college coaches, a way to compete against the big boys that they hadn't before. That, man, if I can recruit a really good quarterback and a couple of receivers, and I can get guys to protect them, man, I'm going to win. I'm going to win a lot of games out there, and I can be competitive in that spot. This isn't Lavelle Edwards and Brigham Young, and so I do think that you're starting to see the after effects of 7-on-7 and what it is doing to not only the college game today, and that you're getting a better group and a more polished group of wide receivers and quarterbacks today. It's also affecting the high school level of recruits coming out. Those guys are used to throwing the football. They're used to making a read. I talked to Bobby about it. He was like, Mike, our deal in the huddle was like we had 3 passing plays. I wasn't reading nothing. I was just throwing it to the guy. Okay, we talking about this was like ancient history, but we talking about 1977. So, it may be ancient history to some, but again, it goes to show the sophistication of the high school game today is showing up because you're getting that type of player, and he's got so much experience. And I've thrown these numbers out. I haven't done it for this year yet, but in the 4 years prior to the 2020 class, Louisiana had produced 45 Division I wide receivers. Okay, I'm going to let those guys just hang out? Come on, no, I got to get them the ball.
Yeah.
So now you're starting to see the after effects of it. And look at in this class of 2021. Matt, what jumps out at you about the class of 2021?
In Louisiana?
In Louisiana. Receivers. Man, they got them.
Kid from Walker, kid from Zachary, yeah.
I mean, Paxton out at Edna Carr.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got all these receivers and you got every college in the world recruiting down here in Louisiana. Come on, I'm not the only one that knows that number. They know it too, and the amount of receivers that the state of Louisiana produces. And so if I've got those receivers, now I got to get a guy that can get the ball to them.
Makes sense. Mike, we're short on time here in this segment, but could you give me a thumbnail on Walker Howard and on Eli Holstein, what you know about each of them?
I've seen Walker more than Eli.
Okay. Man, kid's a freshman. It's hard to see, yeah.
Yeah, Walker is a guy, compact delivery, nice over the top. It's quick, it's fast. He gets the ball out real quick. And he's not use the right term here. He's not judgmental on a throw. And what I mean by that is he doesn't overthink it. I think a lot of times when I watch a quarterback who struggles, it's almost like a yo-yo. Like he wants to throw it, want to throw it. And it's almost like, when he throws it, it's almost like he would want to pull that thing back. And you watch Howard throw the football, man, there's no judgmental about it. He knows exactly where he's going with the ball, which is a great trait for him. And he's got good footwork. He sets up fast. He throws the ball on balance, and he's got some skills. And he's going to physically get stronger. I think that's the part about high school quarterbacks that when we see them, okay, everybody made a big thing about Arch Manning, okay? He was 170 pounds, now he's 190 pounds. Okay, look his age. Isn't he at the age of the growth spurt? So, yep. Yeah, he's going to put that weight on him, and he's physically going to get stronger. Just look at his two uncles and his grandfather. It don't take, come on. It don't take much to figure that one out. He's going to grow into a man throwing that football, and Howard will too. He is a really good prospect. He's a guy that understands the game very well, and you can see it by the way he throws the football. He does not have a lot of what I call hesitation in his throw.
Quick thought on Holstein, for what you've seen of him?
From what I've seen of him, he's a skinny drink of water. He can sling it now. Now, the ball comes out a little bit differently, but you know what? That I would never break that. That's just how he's going to throw the ball. Sometimes it's not directly over the top. Sometimes it's a little bit three-quarters or half. But, boy, he's accurate. He knows where to go with the football. He's very decisive on his throws, and he's got some movement skills that can buy him a little bit of time outside the pocket range. I love to watch him develop as a player because, we're talking about kind of a real quick look at Holstein at this point. But real quickly, it's not always picture perfect, but he gets it done. Man, listen, it don't matter to me how you do it as long as you do it. It's like, okay, there's different ways to do a math problem, okay? I've learned that long ago. There's different ways to do it. And if it suits you and it's correct, I'm not breaking you of how to do it, okay, if you can kind of shorten a step. It's the same way with throwing a football. If you know how to throw it and it comes out a little bit differently, you would never teach somebody how to throw the football like Brett Favre. That ball came out as funky as you could possibly imagine. And his dad, who worked with us, must say 7 years on our Monday night show, he was like, I didn't teach him a damn thing. He just went out there and slung it. And people was like, well, why didn't you throw the football like that in high school? And he was like, because nobody's going to catch it. Brett had so much mustard on that ball. He's like, man, them receivers, they were like bracing, for that shot. He used to always term it. It was like the Oswald shot. You see that famous picture with Oswald gets shot. And he's bracing back, and that's what that's what Herb used to say. Everybody was like that. It was they were bracing for that ball to hit him. So he said, a 16, 17-year-old kid bracing for the way Brett threw the football. He was like a coat in the field. You had to kind of break him a little bit that he couldn't throw every pass like it was coming out of, a cannon.
All right, Mike D, we learned college football is looking at about a 6-week ramp-up period to get things back on track. What do you think, Mike? Is that enough how they're going to position this?
I don't know about enough, but that's what you're going to have. And nobody's got an advantage. Everybody's in
True.
the same sort of boat at that stage. So, Matt, it is what it is. Will it have some maybe uneven play early? Probably so. I mean, just football's not a switch. You can't turn it on and off like your electricity.
Mm-hmm.
You got to work with it, and the timing part of that. And not just quarterback and receiver, but also offensive line play, the defensive calls, and where you have to line up. And that's where, Matt, I think teams with great leadership are going to excel. To have people that can tell younger players what they have to do on every play, not 50% of the time or 70% of the time, 100% of the time, what they have to do. Because I think early on with the limited amount of practice, you're going to see more big mistakes, and they're going to try to go after it. And I would, wouldn't you? Okay, if I had a great pitch and catch combination, I'm not trying to get you somewhere. I'm not going to throw the football where you're going to make a mistake in coverage. I'm going after you, and I'm going to jump on you like a bad cat. And see how well you handle it. I'm going to jump on you and see how well you can do with it. So I do think you're going to see that early on with some teams struggling with the mental part of the game when you have a lot of changeover in certain spots. But I think, man, the leaders, that's what I think now the coaches are going to have to rely on, because you're not on the field with them. They have to make those calls. They have to make those adjustments and those quick reads as a quarterback. So I do think you're going to probably see a little bit more. But I think, once you get out of the first couple games, man, you're back in the groove. But maybe early there's going to be some misjointment here. And you would understand that with basically no spring and a limited amount of what you can do in the fall.
Like, what about in the NFL? Looks like the preseason is going to be shortened from 4 to 2 games. Now, I know you're lying, Mike. Practice is for the unskilled.
Yep.
But that's also a spot in those preseason games where some guys are in roster spots, right? So how do you balance that in the preseason with moving from 4 to 2 games?
Well, one of the things that puts a lot of pressure, again, on the head coach. Okay, you have a limited amount of time to judge him in a game. You are going to get practice. But I say this every year, and it happens. There's a player that looks great in practice. You put him in a game, and he wets the diaper. I mean, He's not used to playing in front of 65, 70,000 people. He's not used to understanding that he's trying to make a roster spot because he's got a scholarship, So there's a little bit of pressure on that young player. And I think more than anything, you hear it from coaches in this league, evaluation is going to be paramount because there are that. And we saw that last year. Emmanuel Butler looked great in practice.
I was waiting for it, Mike. I thought you were going to say say it after the wet the diaper.
He really looked great in practice. Yeah. And to see number 9 run down there after he makes a one-handed catch, and the coverage is right there, and he makes a one-handed catch, and Brees runs down there, and patting him on the back, hitting him. Man, I've seen it a few times happen, but that's not normally what you see a quarterback's reaction to a play like that. And then he gets in a game, and he struggled with his confidence. Again, it's the Allen Iverson line, okay? Practice is practice, and the games are games. And, I think Emmanuel's got a chance to be a good player in the NFL. He struggled with that in the preseason. And that's why little Jordan Humphrey made the team, and he became a developmental player. So that's going to be the tough evaluation for the head coach and what you go off of. And then how do you play your veterans in 2 games? Okay, you don't want to get them hurt. You're getting paid to win regular season games. Preseason, you do what you got to do. So I want to see how coaches handle which looks like it's going to happen, they'll cut it from 4 to 2. How do you play your veterans to get them ready for the regular season? How are you going to do that part?
Would you play him at all, Mike? I'm not sure I'd put a veteran player out there. At least not ones that you're certainly going to count on.
I think you're going to have to play him again. And again, I go back to it. It's not a switch.
Yeah.
And I do think the Saints, Saints, Kansas City, teams with Seattle, not a lot of movement of players and coaches, have a bit of an advantage here in that, you're sort of used to the same guy. You sort of know what he can do and what he can't do well. I think have a bit of an advantage early on. It's going to be the young coaches or coaches just coming into the league or our team in major transition. That's going to take a little while.
Yeah.
And we see it every year. Early on, the offense has an advantage. I think it just takes a little while for defenses to come around. And that used to not be the case, but I think today in the way they practice, and you go out to the practice field, when they're in pads once every 4 days.
Yeah.
Come on. That's difficult to get that down and taking the right angle and physically, because it is a physical game. It is a brutal game. To understand that part gets out. Now, come October, mid-October and on, those games get jammed up a little bit. It's a much more of a 20s game than, say, in September where you got a lot of 30s game and 40s game. Because I think today the pitch and catch game has a bit of an advantage early, and I think it'll have an advantage again. Okay. But I'm really interested in how the head coaches will handle if there's 2 preseason games, because I know who's going to make. I know for the most part, if it's a 53, 55-man roster, I know probably 45 guys.
Saints, it may be even higher than that.
But there's always going to be 8 or 10 that you can go either way, because it's become a numbers game. Do I keep an extra defensive tackle or do I keep an extra safety? I got a guy who's great on special teams, but he's maybe not the best cover guy in the world. Do I keep him? I think about 2 years ago, J.T. Gray making this football team. J.T. didn't make it because of his cover skills. He made it because he was a fantastic special teams guy. Mm-hmm. I think about Josh Hill, and he's told me more than once that a big part of him making this roster was he was a good special teams player, and he was playing on all the special teams. That sort of tells you, hey, you're going to make it. When you're playing on all of them, you're going to make it.
Yeah.
That's where, Matt, I think is going to be the tough evaluation, because there are 8 or 10 every year that could kind of sway one way or another depending on injuries and depending on how you want to keep roster sizes and where you want to keep them, because those are the toughest cuts. Those last few cuts are really difficult. And I think probably what you said is going to happen. You're going to see very little of the veterans and a lot of the younger players, and a lot of those guys that are in that, that 10, 12, 15, those final guys trying to make the roster and how they fit and how they handle playing in the NFL. This ain't college football. It's not the Arena League. It's the NFL. How will you handle that, not only mentally, but handling some of the distractions of playing in a bigger stadium and everything that goes along with it.
Ask Mike your opinion on which draft choice or undrafted rookie free agent makes the biggest impact for the Saints this year.
I'm going to take a shot with Adam Troutman, the tight end.
And there was a interesting comments made by Dan Campbell this week about Troutman. Be very, very pleased if he lives up to the Gronk Kittle expectation.
All I know is, Matt, everybody you have talked to, if it's his former high school coach, his college coach, watching him at the Senior Bowl, is that you have got someone here that gets it. I mean, he really does. Gives you great effort, and in an offense that likes to get the football to the tight end and is used to using multiple tight ends in that offense. So while I was going to say Zach Bowen at first, because I think Zach will certainly help, especially in the pass rush part of the game. I think that's where he excels right now, is being getting up the field. And I think he'll need a little bit of work in the coverage part of the game. Troutman in this offense, I think can make a pretty quick impact as far as a rookie's concerned.
Sorry, Mike. Mark Shelton asks, heading into camp, should the Saints add a veteran defensive back or linebacker?
I would say I've been, beating the drum. I think cornerback. You never have enough of those type players. You never have enough cover people. And it would be something that I would want to add. Now, again, finances come involved, and what those players want at this stage, and many of them want way more than any team is willing to pay at this spot. So cornerback is the one spot I would want to add, because I just think you don't know about Patrick Robinson and with his injuries, age, and I would want as many cover guys as I can get.
Ask Mike, do you think LSU has a chance to sign Arch Manning?
I think they have a chance. I wouldn't put him as the favorite.
Right.
I'll certainly not put him as the favorite there. But I've told you this before, and he got picked up all over. I think he's going to end up being the most highly recruited football player ever from the state of Louisiana.
Who would have that designation now?
Oh, Fournette.
Okay.
Leonard, man, when he came out, Matt, I guarantee you there wasn't a school in America that wasn't after him.
Okay.
And I think the same thing will happen with Arch, that he is going to be that type of player. And so it'll be interesting with him, and he's been around it, understanding the programs in college football, which ones have had one quarterback after another. My thing is keep an eye on Clemson.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, that program, when you think about what they have been able to get, and, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, that's a pretty good tandem right there.
Keep him out of the SEC. He's Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network at SI, and with us every Thursday, courtesy of Sazerac Rye. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, brother.